Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for our discussion sponsored by Panzura and US CAD called How to Make Remote Work Work. Joining me today is Jeff Gillis, Director of IT at Somos, Don Piliero, VP of Technology at MV5, and myself, Joe Cates. I am the Business Line Director of Cloud Platforms for US CAD. The goal for today is to talk a little bit about where we're at, or rather where things were when the pandemic started, how Somos and MV5 were prepared in some ways and things that they weren't prepared for, talk about some of the things that they've had to do as a result of COVID, and then what the future holds for them. So thank you, panelists. Before we get started, Jeff, could you give us a little background on your role at Somos?
Sure. So Somos is a multidiscipline consulting firm. We offer services related to traditional engineering, mostly civil, some surveying and geospatial, as well as construction management and environmental services. And we have both clients in the public and private industries. We're about 600 employees, a little more than that right now. And we have 15 offices that are located mostly in the Western United States. This next year is actually a pretty exciting year for us. We'll be celebrating our 75th year anniversary. So it's a great milestone for us to reach. I've been with Somos for 25 years, and I actually started out on the engineering side of the fence, but pretty quickly moved over into IT, and I've been there for the bulk of 20 years.
75 years is a pretty amazing achievement. Congratulations to Somos on that.
Thanks.
Don, could you share a little bit about your role at MV5?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. My name is Don Piliero. I'm the VP of Technology for NV5. Much like Jeff had just stated, we are mostly a civil engineering firm. We do professional services, geospatial, environmental, and construction management. We have at this time, about 4,000 employees worldwide, and give or take about 100 offices, physical offices. I've been with the company since the initial acquisition of Nolte Associates, and that was about 10 years ago that I came on to a leadership role within NV5 IT.
Perfect. Thank you, Don. 4,000 employees is a lot of people to be making sure are safe and sound and able to work remotely. So kudos to you, sir. In our conversations leading up to this, we talked a lot about, how IT is viewed by the organization, and how really in the initial early days of lockdown and COVID really coming to, prominence in the US, IT was sort of the savior of the organization. And for Somos and for MV5, a lot of that was due to the preparation and decisions that you had made prior to this pandemic. Don, could you share some of the decisions and pieces that you had in place that made you prepared or helped you be prepared for working remotely?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the major things that we've had to do as a company, while we do grow internally through organic growth quite a bit, we also are a company that acquires other companies in order to gain a foothold within certain disciplines that we're looking to expand upon. That being the case, we had to, even before COVID, we had to have a plan that we could scale our networks, scale our enterprise to a level that we could allow sharing and security and all of these things that are necessary to be a successful multidiscipline company, especially with the kind of map that we were working with across the United States and overseas. And so that's when we started implementing, a more robust kind of a sharing platform. Panzura was one of the things that we looked to in order to be able to share our files and our work between offices. Because before that, we were a much more traditional enterprise in that we had everybody was their own little island with a server in their office, and they would work on those files, and that would be that. But as time went on, we had a lot more people that needed to work remotely, work from field offices, just basically working all of the time is what we had to do. So that laid the groundwork for us to have what we needed in place in that regard. Another thing, and one of the benefits of having in this case, having an overseas presence was one of our offices, one of our groups works in the Hong Kong area. So with a lot of the stuff going on, and a lot of this is guesswork. You can never anticipate a lot of this stuff. But with all of the stuff going on politically in Hong Kong, we saw the necessity to start having the ability for people to work from home more like they were working from the office. So we took advantage of the knowledge that we had from that, and also the early coronavirus changes that were going on in that area, and we built up our VPN, which was something that I've looked at our VPN, and even with a very large company like us, maybe maxing out at a couple hundred people a time at any one time on the VPN, and then quickly moving to thousands of people on a VPN. Thankfully, we had the foresight, and I'd like to take credit for that, just being able to see into the future, but that was not it. We took the time we had and we went forward and said, hey, we need to build up our VPN footprint, and thankfully we did before all of this really came to a head.
Yeah, it's amazing, some of those decisions that can prove to be quite fortuitous, and I can't imagine dealing with the political unrest in Hong Kong plus COVID. That's again, kudos to you, sir, in navigating those two challenges. Jeff, same question to you as far as your preparedness and decisions you made prior to the pandemic, and how that prepared you.
Yeah, like Don, we obviously didn't see this coming, and the stuff we had in place was really geared around our need for our employees who were located in one office to work on a project that was housed in another office. And so in the olden days, which was probably only 10 years ago, we would spin up a remote desktop connection of actual physical workstation, and they would be in office A and remote into that office B location so they could work and be as close to the data as possible. That presented obviously a lot of challenges with just maintaining redundant hardware and figuring out who was on which machine at which time, and it was kind of a nightmare. And so obviously we are a Panzura customer, and when we first heard about it, that was our motivation to look at it, was that the solution would enable us to no longer do that, and instead have our employees work off of their local workstation and access data in basically any location as it's brought over to the local controller, and the file locks are maintained and everything like that. So that was our initial motivation, and that kind of set us up for this. But we quickly found that there was a lot of great things that kind of came along for the ride, if you will, once we got going with Panzura. Things like we no longer had to maintain these file servers, in every location, these Windows heavy OS, managing the storage, making sure we had enough available storage on each of these servers, thinking about failover. What happens when they go down? We obviously, wanted to make sure we did have a solution in place for that, but that's no longer the case, no longer needed. And then backups, right? We were used to backing up all of our file servers to tape, shipping them off to Iron Mountain, like many of us were doing, and then, God forbid, when someone needed a restore, taking days to get that tape back in the office and spinning it back up, and then finding, oh wait, this was the wrong data, right? We need to get a different tape. That was always fun. So that kind of, now we're all in the cloud, and it's I think we couldn't be happier with the choices we've made, and that really did set the table for us to be able to support remote work as we delved into this pandemic.
Sure. Yeah, and one of the things I think you and I talked about too before was just the challenges of, it's one thing to have those pieces in place, but there are challenges in trying to get those pieces in place and your experience is a little bit different than Don's in that, Don, while there's been a lot of a growth organically for MV5, a lot of that growth has also come from acquisition, and that's kind of how Panzura fell into Don's lap. But for you, you had to, sink your teeth into it and find a solution. And one of the challenges I see from talking to people is that people have cloud strategies or cloud first. We're a cloud first company, and it's sometimes in talking to IT, they're like, that's what our CEO says, but I don't know that we really know what that means.
Yeah.
And so could you share some of those challenges as far as what it was like, as you developed your cloud strategy and looked at moving towards, this, global file system with Panzura?
Yeah, I think kind of like I alluded to in talking about how we moved to Panzer, we really didn't have an initial cloud strategy. It was that the technology took us to the cloud, and we suddenly realized we were there, and it started opening doors for what we could do. And so, we were able to leverage all of these tools and find more tools and really expand our cloud infrastructure to be able to do a lot more than we ever thought we could.
Sure. Don, you had mentioned that when you were, as part of the acquisition, some of the people that or companies that you had purchased were leveraging Nasuni, and then one or two of the companies were leveraging Panzura. How did you figure out what was the right solution moving forward, and what challenges did you have, as the IT or VP of technology as it relates to bringing in Panzura?
Yeah. So one of the nice parts, I mean, while there are definitely obstacles when you are bringing in new groups through acquisition and trying to have a cohesive environment for everyone to be in, one of the nice parts is that a lot of our proof of concepts are already done because a company has been using something successfully. And NV5 itself did look into Panzura on its own, and because of everything going on, whether it be acquisition or just projects in general, we hadn't been able to finish a proof of concept, be able to say, hey, this is going to work for us. So one of the nice parts was having these things that I could do, for lack of a better term, apples to apples comparisons on, and say, hey, which one of these will actually work for us better? I mean, they're both working. I'm going to be honest. They were both working, and they were, it was more of what feature set do we need? What do we really need to focus on? And in reality, where we were pushed to Panzura for sure is the idea of working with Revit, while Nasuni and others do a good job with other Autodesk products. We found that Panzura was the most reliable with the file locking on Revit, and that's really what pushed us in that direction to say, hey, we know this can work. And thankfully, I had the ability to look at two actual existing environments and see which one worked better. And I know that that's not an opportunity that a lot of people get. So, I was very thankful to be able to put, two of the leaders in the space up against each other in reality, not in a test environment, but in an actual production environment.
Yeah, that's I can agree with you that I imagine most organizations can't have that 10,000-foot view of, okay, head to head, let's do it. So yeah, that's a great story, and I appreciate your honesty too, right? There's a reason why Nasuni is in business, right? If it didn't work, they wouldn't have any business. So one of the things we talked about is, it was great that we had Panzura in place to, handle some of the remote working, but obviously that couldn't have solved all your problems, right? There's things that come up that you can't anticipate, like you talked about, and it was hopeful that you would share some of those things that you had adopted after the pandemic was in, flux, if you will, to really address some of those things and what those challenges were and what solutions you adopted to address them. So I'll put that question to you, Jeff.
Yeah, so we went from working pretty much, 90+% of our employees working in the office to that same 90%, if not more, working from home within 3 weeks with basically no planning. We had a couple weeks to figure it out, and it was a stressful couple of weeks to say the least. One of the challenges we faced was that 80% of our staff, our design staff, was using workstations. It's still using workstations. So we didn't have a very widespread laptop implementation. And so IT kind of gathered around, and we couldn't think of a good solution to allow those workstations to go home, put VPN on them, and still be able to support them effectively. And so luckily we had a very small VDI implementation when we were using VMware, with about 10 virtual desktops that people would use for various purposes. But we found that there was a technology from VMware called Direct Connect. So we could leverage the infrastructure we already had in place for VDI and allow our employees to connect directly to their workstations that remain in the office and use basically, the VMware Horizon client to connect those workstations and continue working on either a Somos laptop that we had available or procured, or even in many instances, their home computer that they had. And so we quickly did some polls and surveys to find out what people had and what their bandwidth was and stuff like that, and developed a very quick plan in a matter of a couple weeks, if not faster, for people to, again, use this VMware Direct Connect. But one thing we learned about as the situation continued and we continued working from home is that because everybody is remote, we noticed that there was more attempts going on from the bad guys, if you will, the cyber criminals, to try to infiltrate our network. And so we quickly learned that we had to do a little bit more than we were used to protect ourselves. And one of the things we've implemented is multi-factor authentication, so that previously we were on MFA for just Outlook, so if you've got an email, you had to fulfill an MFA if you were not using your base computer. But we've also implemented an MFA to the VMware Horizon client I talked about, as well as VPN. So that was a big technology that we looked at and have brought on since the pandemic.
Yeah, the multi-factor authentication is becoming more and more prevalent, and I think we talked about yesterday. It's sort of a blessing in disguise, because it can also free you up from having to remember so many passwords, because as long as you have your phone on, you can log into your account. Right. That being said, it's for sure interesting how everyone being at home also means that all the hackers are at home too. So they have plenty of time for creative attempts at attacking your network. So Don, could you share some of the challenges that MV5 faced, above and beyond, some of the things you were solving with Panzura?
Sure. So, I think our experience is not, too much different than, what Jeff had talked about in that regard. Those are all the things that really came and popped up and were really in your face as far as IT groups go when trying to deal with remote work. It's one thing, to deal with a fraction of your employees, but to deal with everybody is quite a bit. So, MFA, self-service passwords, things that we had just, we could have put in self-service passwords whenever, we just didn't. It was more of a service. We would reset people's passwords for them, stuff like that. Those things started to fall by the wayside because we had much more important tasks to take on as far as making people work remotely. So having the ability to free ourselves up from certain things. So there were things on the horizon that we were looking to do that we went in full implementation mode on that for a lot of those kind of things. Another thing that we did have to leverage, while we have a virtual environment, just like Somos does, we decided to expedite people being able to work from home on desktops by utilizing more of the Microsoft remote desktop gateways. We had, we had to harden those, obviously, make sure that they were secure. But those were things that we quickly tried to roll out because we had one in our data center because not a lot of people used it. And then it became something that there's no way that this was going to be able to support the number of people that we needed to by simply wishing it. We had to get it done. So that was definitely something that we put a lot of focus on in that regard. Thankfully for us, we did have, we do have, very similar to Jeff. We do have a lot of people that do work on desktops, our main production people, but thankfully technology has gotten better on the laptop side, and we've been able to have a little bit more mobile devices in that regard for those types of people that do need the heavy processing and the heavy video GPU processing on their side. So I'm a firm believer in that you can't really have a resilient policy for business continuity unless people have computers. And that's why we've been pushing towards laptops for a long time here at NV5 to make sure that people have the resources they need. We can't do it for everybody. They simply don't make laptops that can do what some of these desktops can do currently, but we try, and that, I believe, helped us a great deal in keeping people working and keeping them on their machines themselves.
Yeah, it's it'd be the laptops of the early 90s that were 5-pound bricks or 15-pound bricks that you would throw your back out throwing it in your messenger bag or your backpack. So well, thank you both for sharing that. I see you have one question in the chat panel. Just a reminder to everyone that you can submit your questions. We'll ask those at the end. But looking at the challenges you had to overcome and sort of how you were prepared, one of the things that you talked about again was just the future and sort of what that looks like for the AEC industry and just what we're heading towards as a from a work culture, right? What's going to happen once these vaccines get released and that we're all of a sudden able to go back out in public again. And so from just a future looking standpoint, I think we can talk about IT in a follow-up question, but what do you think the future looks like for the AEC industry? And I'll put that question to Jeff.
Yeah, so as I kind of said in our pre-call yesterday, one thing I've learned through this experience is predicting the future is dangerous because it ain't going to be the way I think. So I think it's critical that whatever happens, we're prepared for it. And that means IT needs to kind of adapt from our traditional ways of doing things to being much more agile and being able to react to what the future holds. That being said, Somos is really heavily looking at cloud for compute. We're pretty good at using cloud for our storage and our servers and backups and things like that. We haven't had much experience using cloud for primary compute for people, but we love the idea that with cloud compute, we can offer much more scalable solutions to our employees. We can adapt their compute needs based on the projects they're working on and things like that. And of course, along with that, we can also offer a much more remote capable solution that they can log in from anywhere and access the same computer they're used to using. So we are currently doing a proof of concept where we have about a half a dozen employees who are working full time on Windows Virtual Desktop. And I see that as something, I don't know if it's that specific technology, there's others out there, but I think something like that is really gonna make inroads over the next couple of years, and you're gonna see a lot more people, a lot more companies of our size at least, that are heavily leveraged in cloud for compute. It's gonna take time. As Don kind of mentioned yesterday, it's expensive right now for sure. It's a little bit more than what we're used to. So we're trying to find where does it make sense given the current landscape and the current cost.
Yeah, as you know, we've invested in that at USCAD, and heading up that part of our business with our Windows Virtual Desktop USCAD Cloud Workstation. And it's interesting when you look at the cost and just the flexibility and all of those different pieces. And that's, what I've heard in conversations with people is that the existing solutions are expensive, or they're, restricting or have contracts or something along those lines that just makes the upper management a little bit nervous about adopting a solution like that. Because the other thing is that, as you guys know, when you give, I was reading my daughter, when you give a mouse a cookie yesterday, when it talks about if you give a mouse a cookie, then they're going to want a glass of milk, and then if they get a glass of milk, they're going to clean their face off. Probably similar with IT, right? If you give somebody a cloud workstation, then they're going to want a 6 monitor setup and all of those different things. So I think there's probably some caution there, but I know from what we've seen and what we're presenting to our clients, the cost for the cloud workstations is, if you have over 100 users and you're using them 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, it's about $100 per user a month. And one of the other challenges is that you have with a lot of the cloud desktop solutions is that they're pre-booking these 24/7, right? You're renting out these machines 24/7, and I think we can all agree that people may want to be productive 24/7. That's definitely not the case. So I think the flexibility is an important part of that as well. So well, thank you for sharing that on the Windows Virtual Desktops. Don, what about you from NV5's point of view as far as the future is concerned? I know you're being Donstradamus.
What was that?
Nostradamus. Yeah. Predicting the future.
Yeah. You get one thing right, and it's like, man, all I can do is wait for getting it wrong next. But it's again, Jeff and I are basically in the same space as far as our companies go. We do have portions of our company that are utilizing cloud compute for geospatial. It's something that has to be done. I mean, we simply can't just purchase enough computing power and the space for it, at the drop of a hat in order to meet deadlines and client needs. So it makes sense in that space. Because we have such a diverse amount of people such a diverse group of people at the company and the types of jobs they do, I can't foresee us ever going to a full cloud compute, simply because it's not, the numbers aren't there to make sense with that. When we're talking construction management, when we're talking program management, and people that are utilizing most of their day Excel and PDFs, to have cloud compute for something like that, it doesn't make financial sense. We would never do it. We would rather go for the sunk cost of purchasing hardware that's going to last, X amount of years that we've worked out in our budgets to say this is where we're going to do it. Because another thing that's very, as you were saying, when upper management says, cloud first, the cost of cloud is not inconsequential, and also it makes budgeting very difficult in most spaces, because you're paying for what you use. When we buy a $10,000 server, you use as much as you want, and that's done. The cost is done and will be depreciated. However, if you're in a cloud and you get a big project, well, if you were spending $1,000 a month, maybe it's going to be $10,000 a month now. Did you budget for that? And how do you budget for something like that? That's kind of one of the things that we definitely wrestle with, is what makes sense to have in the cloud and what doesn't. And, we very much stuck with a hybrid environment as far as having on-prem and cloud. And I don't see any changes as far as that goes. And I know I'm probably not answering your questions, because I'm talking about, you asked me what's supposed to be in the future, and the future is now. That's what it is. We're already doing it. So yeah. That's kind of where we are. But I am seeing the benefits in when you have a cost-controlled environment for VDI, it makes sense because now you can have as powerful a computer as you want for the time that you need it, and then it goes away, and it's not an issue. So I agree with you in that sense, is that when we can capture this and have a more direct line on how much will this cost me, and can I just pay for it when I need it, as opposed to 24/7 when I know nobody's using it, those are when we're going to see big shifts, and we'll be able to embrace VDI a little bit more on our side at that point, because I can say this is what it's going to cost, and I know what it's going to do for the rest of our budget year.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you, Don. You know, our construction managers, our environmental scientists, you know, it's pretty unlikely that many of them will be using some type of VDI computer, at least in the near term. We'll see what happens down the road. Like I said earlier, we need to be agile, but right now we're really looking for the really heavy lifting, the people who, and it's all, to me, it's all about data, right? It's people who work with very large data sets, who need high compute, who need to be next to that data. Working remotely is not going to be fun unless we get them remoted into something that's right next to the data. So that's our motivation in looking for a solution like VDI.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing just, you know, when you start to hear about some of these projects people are working on, and with 3D scanning and drones and 4K video and all of these things. And that's, you know, one of the things Panzura talks about in their initial presentations is the data doubling and just the growth in data. And you know, there's the data aspect, but then there's actually the compute aspect of managing and manipulating all that data. And it's presenting two different problems, you know. And so you know, that's where I've thrown my hat in the ring as far as USCAD and trying to help organizations manage those two different aspects of design, because it's critical that, you know, the software that we sell you works, and that you're able to do things as quickly and as efficiently as possible, with also keeping costs under control too, right, Don?
Right.
So, well, thank you for sharing that. Don, one of the things we talked about yesterday, again, questions, feel free to submit those in the chat, and we'll get to those towards the end. We talked a little about real estate, right? And people working remotely, and, you know, how, you know, MV5 is evaluating, well, you have over 100 offices. Is it necessary to have 100 offices? And could you speak to that a little bit more?
Sure. I mean, today I'm in my office here in Sacramento, and you know, there's basically no one here. And you know, we obviously have safety precautions. We're concerned about the safety of our employees and their health. So there's not a lot of interaction in the office this time. Do we see the need for having offices, for having places where people can get together and collaborate and things like that? Absolutely. But does the footprint look the same? That's one of the things that we're looking at and trying to understand is how does this work, and what will it be in the future? And that's you know, we're taking a very, very hard look at where are these offices and do we need to have them? Sometimes we have to. For client needs, we have to have a place where we can have an office and we're in that jurisdiction and we're working there. But if we're looking at a long-term view of the way that people like to work, the way that new generations of people coming on view technology and the ability to be remote and working hours, we all have to take a hard look at that and understand that COVID, while it forced our hands, this has been an experiment that we've been looking at for a very long time. Does this work? This was the way that we found out, oh, it does work without, you know, on our own, you know, impacting our business. We were impacted by what happened. So that was a huge thing for us. And yes, we are looking at you know, the cost of having buildings and offices, you know, some of them being quite large. You know, that's bottom line money. that can come back to the company, that can be used for whether it be salary, whether it be investment in technology, whether it be investment in anything. That's a cost that if it can come back to us and we can figure out ways using technology to be able to have the same level of productivity and profitability that we had before, that will only benefit all of us in the industry to say, okay, we don't have to follow the rules that we used to follow all the time of every engineer needs to be sitting in front of their computer at a desk in an office. We can go ahead and say, these people are productive. We know they can do it. Let's reinvest that money in things that make a lot of sense for us as a company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's it's an interesting point, and it sort of allowed, as horrible as COVID has been, it sort of allowed companies to create a bubble to test in, right? It made it so that these things that people have been talking about or looking at, as far as moving to the cloud and what that looks like, it lit gas, or basically poured gasoline on that fire of people transitioning to how do we enable people to work from anywhere at any time with any device.
Exactly, because this was all talked about in like in an academic way, like, oh, this is possibly something we could do. Well, we had our hand forced and we saw, oh wow, we can actually do this. But most companies, and I'll say, I don't blame NV5 for not taking the leap, because it's a huge thing. It's a huge thing that we saw even technology companies not embracing straight away. So absolutely, our hand was forced, and I think that now there's no going back. We need to figure out how we do this in a reasonable manner.
Sure. I was trying to change my lighting as I have the
Yeah,
sun.
I'm worried. I thought we lost you for a second, Jeff.
Yeah, I have the sun blaring in my
fine.
eyes. I look like I'm in the shadows, flashlight reading questions. Well, thank you for sharing that. Jeff, as far as real estate is concerned and people working remotely and being, whether or not you are reevaluating your space, is that something that Somos is doing as well?
Without a doubt, we're in leases for most of our space. So as those leases come up, we're certainly going to be reevaluating what the needs are. You get people who are driving to downtown LA and have a 2-hour commute each way, and we've proven that some of them can certainly be effective working at some level from some remote location, whether it be home or even somewhere else. So I think we're going to see more and more situations where people are asking us to support that. And also, right now we tend to hire based on locale. So if there's a job opening for an engineer in Orange County, we look at that general area, but maybe there's a really talented person in Nebraska, I don't know where, who can fill that role, who'd be a perfect fit. I think we need to be more prepared to, the HR stuff aside, we got to figure all that. But other than that, IT at least, again, it gets back to agility. We've got to be able to support this, because that's what our employees are going to demand from us in the future. It's this pandemic has proven that it can be done, and so the cat's out of the bag, if you will, and they're going to start expecting us to be able to support whatever their specific circumstances warrant.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've been talking about as far as Panzura and just the cloud workstations, is just the ability to attract and retain top talent, right? And having that, you're providing your employees the tools and the ability to be able to control their destiny, right? They can work at any time, and they can work from anywhere, and they can travel and be productive anywhere. It's amazing to think that we could all have lake homes or something along those lines and be living, or vividly living remotely in like Montana, and still be working, and no matter what we do. Obviously travel is a luxury that many of us don't have in the current climate. But one of the questions
we've had a few employees who for whatever reason decided to go back home, for example, for a couple months and relocate for a temporary time. And so this is exactly the scenario. We need to continue to support them in Michigan or wherever they were, as long as we had the HR stuff in order, which sometimes we had to get in order. But that's the future. I think we're going to see more and more of that.
I thought you were going to say that van life. I don't know if you've seen any of those things of these people that they've bought commercial vans, converted them into their offices. So they have like a mobile office with like satellite dishes for internet on them.
Yeah. Well, with Starlink, pretty soon we'll be able to use internet anywhere, right?
Yeah. The technology is coming a long way, and then 5G and all of those pieces. I think plenty of topics we could have for conversations later. So, well, thank you all for sharing that information. At this time, I think we'll turn it over to some of the questions that we have. One of the questions I had for the people that are listening was along the lines of, if we were to do away with physical offices, would they want to go back into an office? Because that was one of the things that we talked a little bit about is it that great working remotely, right? I love working at my house, but at a certain point, you just want to get like out of the house and go do something different. So
I can tell you for this call, I have 2 teenage daughters and my wife here, and so for this call, to minimize background noise, I asked them all to leave because I knew that the interruptions would be strong otherwise. So I think there's a mix, Joe, to answer, if I can answer first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's folks, like I said, who have the 2-hour commute each way who are like, oh God, if I can work from home even a portion of the time, that gives me so much more quality of life. And then there's the folks who, the office is right next door and they really like going in and being with others and experiencing the office dynamics. And there is certainly some, I think, some proof that people are more productive when they work together in teams. I mean, I think we can do it without that, but I think when we're all huddled around a table, we tend to get a little bit better results than when we're all huddled around a Zoom. Doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means that I think we'll always have, at least in the near term, until who knows what technology is going to come to continue improving that, right? But that we'll still have that basic human need to kind of get together and work together.
Yeah, I haven't seen on the commercial they have for Teams that you see where people are all like sitting in stands, like
together.
I feel like that would be helpful, because what I found is in Zoom meetings, everybody talks over each other, and it's like you can't read body language of who wants to speak, who's going to speak, and so it's like, oh, blah, 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 you go.
Right. It's like if you say over.
Yeah, right. And I'm finished. Don, your thoughts?
I mean, thankfully, I'm fortunate enough that I have an office that I can, close the door in and stuff like that. Part of our our plan for precautions for COVID is that, if you're in an office without without a closed door, you need to have a mask on, things of that nature in order to keep people safe. I think that, I come at it from a different point of view at that point, because I can come into the office and I don't mind coming into the office and sitting there, but I'm not wearing a mask all the time and I'm not doing all of that stuff. So I understand from an employee side in general that if you're sitting at your desk with a mask all day long, maybe you do like working from home better. Maybe that is the better way to do it. But yeah, I mean, I agree with Jeff. It's like, there was a lot of things that you can look at as far as collaborating with people, collaborating with your team when you're in person. I mean, if I'm being honest, the problem with working from home is that you never stop working. The quote unquote, like, water cooler conversations don't exist when you're sitting by yourself on a computer all day long. So realistically, I think it's a toss-up as far as productivity. Not that I want more productivity. I feel like I do a pretty good job of being productive. But when you're just sitting there from sun up till sundown by yourself, you don't have a whole lot of extraneous conversations with people. You just work. I don't love that part. I prefer to have a little bit of interaction, take a break and talk about something stupid for a little bit with people.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it feels like we have more meetings and less time in the COVID world. But you find yourself talking to your dog, or but I digress. So we do have one question in the chat panel. I'm not sure if I need to scroll down to see if there's more, but what process did you harden your RDG gateway with, Remote Desktop Gateway with, Azure MPS MFA extension, and anything else?
Okay, so that would be for me.
People to translate.
Yeah. So yes, to answer the question, yes, we are Azure AD, so that is a part of it. As far as where they were placed, we do use a series of firewall and load balancing devices, hardware devices, in order to protect those RDP gateways. But another thing that we have, due to some security requirements that for clients we also use a Duo in certain instances. So some of our work was done using Duo fobs for while it's not something that the entire company uses. A good portion of the people that are utilizing the RDP gateway would utilize the Duo security as well.
Yeah, we use Duo as well. That's actually the MFA technology that we are just about done implementing. Microsoft's moving along with its full-blown MFA beyond just Office 365, but at this point for us, it didn't seem like it quite met our needs, so we did move forward with Duo.
Another question: what is the optimal configuration for Panzura working in the cloud? It's a good question. Interesting question. Do you guys want to take that one first, or?
Yeah, I think it's really dependent on. There's a lot to unpack there, but I think it's dependent on your individual use cases and what you want. Whether you want to be multi-cloud, or even kind of no cloud, which is where we started. We were in the cloud, meaning that all of our data, our golden copy was in Amazon, but you couldn't access it. So it was just there, and the individual Panzura controllers could talk to it and push data up and pull it down. Since then, we've gone to actually we have a cloud controller in Azure, a Panzura cloud controller in Azure, so that the people who are using Windows Virtual Desktop can log in and access all of the data that they need, just as if they're in any other office. And I will mention that we got that thing up in no time at all. I was shocked how quick it was to get that Panzura controller up in Azure. So I think it's tough to come up with for me at least, to come up with a single answer to that question, but maybe those are some of the things that you want to consider. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Don.
No, I think that we are not set up with an Azure instance of Panzura. So I think realistically what you're saying is optimally you do have for your, as with anything, you want to be closest to the data as possible for people to utilize it as quickly as possible. On our side, we do, our main controller is going to be in our data center, and because that's a burstable internet connection, you're essentially using it as whatever speed you can get to it at. So you're going to be constrained by your home internet in this, if we're talking about people working remotely this way. So the home internet is really the only bottleneck that you're going to hit at that point, because they are fairly robust in delivering data as quickly as you ask for it, for the most part. So that's kind of the way we're set up. I think that probably in the way that Jeff is set up, that would be optimal if you're setting it up new. You know, you don't want to just get a data center just to get it. We have it because we have many services that we run through our data center. But if you're going to move to Panzura, I would agree with Jeff that the optimal way you're going to want to do it is put it in Azure right next to the data, and that's the fastest way that your people are going to get access to what they need.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because it's
Also paying for compute, Jeff, right?
yeah.
What was that? I missed that, Don.
You're also paying for the compute, and that's something you need to factor in.
Totally.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because I think pre-COVID we might have had a different answer than potentially post-COVID, because you know, having that edge machine in an office and having that, you know, really close to the users, obviously, like Don said, it's, you know, data closest to the users. Looking at something like a, you know, a VDI solution like WVD, you're going to be looking at potentially wanting to have that in the cloud and have it right next to where the data is. You know, the interesting aspect too is that you have, depending on if, you know, for MB5, you're in multiple different regions, right? So you're going to have your compute and your data in the same region, so the ingress egress charges shouldn't be there. But what does that mean when you go to the mountains or the west or the east? And so I think Panzura can be a really strong solution to basically reconcile all that data across all those different regions as well. And you know, then it becomes a question of when, if you have an office space, how many people are going to be in that office, you know, post COVID, and if there's, you know, a full attendance in the offices, maybe it makes sense to have you know, a device on site too. So good question.
Well, I think with the new way, sorry to interrupt you, but I think with the new way that they're licensing in regards to you know, the amount of data and then providing you with virtual, the cost of setting up your own virtual server in the office is, you know, nominal. The price point for entry before was quite a bit, and you needed to make a real big decision on whether you were going to go with virtual or physical hardware. But now that has changed, I don't think that I think that having something, even if you're going to have a handful of people in the office, the investment that you would need to make would pay off in their ability to work much more quickly and productively, depending on what you're working on. If you're setting it up just to share files, yeah, it's not going to matter. But if they're working on Civil 3D, if they're working in Revit, you want that server there. You do not want it. You do not want that to be cloud if they're working on physical computers in an office. In my opinion.
No, I completely agree. And you know, I think the way the pricing model is now, it's like you said, Don. It's in all of our offices. In fact, we have a virtual appliance already there that's hosting a number of servers. So we just need to add some disk and some memory in most cases, and we could throw our virtual Panzura in there with no additional cost other than the original agreement we had for the data.
Perfect. Well, I think we're approaching the end, so I think we could probably keep talking for, you know, an hour or so, but I feel like we want to make sure that we're succinct in when we close. So I'm going to end it with, I appreciate your guys' time today and sharing that information with us. I think this was a good, productive discussion. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Panzura, and hopefully we'll catch you on the next discussion that we have. So thank you everyone for your time, and have a great afternoon.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.